You tell yourself you are not going to buy anything. You're just looking, just scrolling. And then it happens. Not because you want to buy the thing, but because there's something inside you that wants the feeling to stop. The tension, the heaviness of the day. There's a brief sense of relief, and almost immediately after, guilt, shame, self-blame. Sounds familiar? Stay with me because you are about to discover that it is not a lack of self-control or how you just are with spending. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for flying with us. Have a great day. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Phenomenally ADHD. I'm your host, Zarena, ADHD and money coach, unapologetic Gen X ADHDer. By the end of this episode, my friend, you will understand why impulsive spending keeps happening with ADHD and why it's not a character flaw. You might be thinking, I'm reckless with money. I just need more self-control. This episode is about to dismantle that belief. 1 minute, you're not even planning on spending, and the next, it's too late. The damage is done, and you think you've failed resisting the urge. Spending feels louder right when boredom, stress, overload, or decision fatigue are present, because they make fast relief incredibly tempting for ADHD brains. I'm sharing this through my lived experience with ADHD and my work as an ADHD and money coach to explain what's actually happening so you can understand the pattern and stop blaming yourself. Impulsive spending isn't about lack of self-control. It's a fast way an ADHD brain uses to regulate how it feels or to avoid something that is too demanding. If this reframe is already making sense for you and is giving you a new way of looking at something incredibly and extremely challenging for us ADHDers, subscribe to or follow the show. Here's a quick question for you. How many adults struggle a great deal because of the impacts ADHD has on their ability to manage money? 7 out of 10. That's correct. An estimated 70% of adults experience significant difficulty with money management. Researchers have had a hard time pinning down a consistent number when it comes to the percentage of people that live with ADHD around the world. But a 2023 study revealed that the global prevalence of adults living with ADHD is about 3.1%. That's approximately 170 million people, and it's probably more than that. So let's do a little math. 70% of 170 million people means 119 million adults with ADHD experience significant difficulty with money management. That's a considerable number. And impulsive spending is one of the most difficult to avoid collisions of all. Do you see why it's important to understand the way money collides with ADHD and how brutal it can be? You know, for a long time, I genuinely believed this was just who I was with money. Reckless, irresponsible, someone who couldn't be trusted to make good financial decisions, no matter how much I cared or how hard I tried. I didn't start paying attention to money until my mid-40s. Before that, I avoided it, ignored it, resented it, wished it just didn't exist. And yes, I spent impulsively more than I wanted to admit. And every time it happened, I added another layer of shame on top of the previous ones. I blamed the lack of financial education. I blamed the system. I blamed my parents. I even blamed money itself. And while some of that context matters, none of it actually explained why the same pattern kept repeating, even when I knew better and even when I wanted to do things differently. They say you don't know what you don't know. So, having no idea how ADHD affects money management, I couldn't possibly know back then how dopamine is involved in this. ADHD brains have lower dopamine levels, and dopamine isn't just about pleasure, it's about motivation, drive, focus, and the ability to engage with effortful or boring tasks. When dopamine is low, the brain doesn't gently ask for relief, it demands it. So when you're bored, overwhelmed, emotionally drained, or mentally exhausted, or avoiding something that feels too demanding, your brain starts looking for a fast way to change how it feels. And spending happens to be one of the quickest, most accessible ways to do that. Not because of the items you're buying, but because of what happens before and during the purchase. There's anticipation, there's stimulation, there's a surge of dopamine, there's a brief sense of relief. For a moment, things feel lighter, quieter, more manageable. And then, almost just as fast, the guilt shows up, the regret, the self-criticism, the familiar story that you can't control yourself, that this is how you are with spending, or any other negative narrative that's been playing over and over again. So, no, impulsive spending isn't about lack of self-control. It's about an ADHD brain trying to increase dopamine, regulate emotions, or both when something feels too boring, too heavy, too demanding, or too much. That's why restraint-based advice so often fails for ADHDers. Things like, don't use your credit card, just cut your expenses, stop being reckless, don't spend more than you earn. That advice assumes the problem is logic or discipline, but when impulsive spending is driven by dopamine and emotional regulation, restriction alone doesn't touch the real issue. It just adds more pressure and more shame to a nervous system that's already depleted. And when you've spent years interpreting that response as a personal flaw, it makes sense that money becomes loaded with shame, avoidance, and self-blame. And here's the bottom line. If this were recklessness, there wouldn't be guilt afterwards. There wouldn't be regret. There wouldn't be anxiety almost immediately after the purchase. That emotional fallout tells us something important. This isn't recklessness or carelessness. It's a regulation issue. So I want to ask you something. What money advice were given to you that never quite worked for your ADHD brain, even though you tried? Let me know in the comments. Once you see this as a regulation issue instead of a personal failure, the pattern starts to shift because the meaning of what's happening changes. And as you're listening, think about the last time you spent impulsively. Not what you bought, but what was actually happening right before. What were you trying to get out of or make stop? Here's how impulsive spending can show up for us as women with ADHD. It doesn't show up just because we don't care about money. It shows up because we're depleted. After a long day of holding it together, after making decisions all day long, after being on for everyone else. We're juggling a gazillion responsibilities: work, family, kids, household, aging parents, friendships, social life. We're most likely late diagnosed, masking, compensating, feeling stuck between a rock and a hard place on so many levels. The pressure, the expectations, the weight, so heavy we can barely keep our heads above water. I see this pattern all the time in women I work with. Women who are smart, capable, experienced. Women who have tried to do the right thing with money and still feel stuck in the same loop when it comes to impulsive spending. It can be a situation with a colleague or your boss, a disagreement with your spouse or your partner. It shows up during or after depletion that comes from stress, boredom, emotional or sensory overload, decision fatigue, rumination. We may have a treasure chest of ways to get relief, and that's also when impulsive spending comes into play. So when we're physically, mentally, or emotionally drained, spending becomes magnetic because the nervous system wants relief. For some, it shows up as online shopping late at night. For others, it's food delivery after a draining day. For others, it's spending on experiences, courses, or things meant to fix a feeling that's hard to name. Personally, for most of my life, it always was, I enjoy life and have fun now. I'll deal with the consequences later. Unfortunately, I didn't realize the extent of those consequences because projecting ourselves in the future is extremely difficult. And I didn't really see the repercussions. That is why, even if you've tried to stop the urge to spend impulsively countless times without much success, you think it's because you lack self-control. And this reminds me of a client I coached in Unlock Your Financial DNA, which is a transformative process designed for ADHD brains. We use the sacred money archetypes to actually create new habits and a healthier relationship with money, which is pretty cool. So this client was able to understand her spending habits and patterns through her first archetype. And she also saw why she'd accumulated debt over the years. And what mattered most wasn't the spending itself. It was finally understanding why it kept happening. If you want more clarity on this or a deeper understanding, I've linked the free ADHD and Money Quiz in the episode's description. Completing the quiz means you're already doing something important and one of the most powerful things you can do, paying attention. And I don't know if you know this, but money loves attention. You gain awareness. You better understand how your brain works, which leads to less judgment and less self-criticism. All you have to do is click the link and it's yours for free. Whether you're aware of it or not, patterned responses show up elsewhere, not just with money. They're recurrent. They've been on autopilot for years. In the case of impulsive spending, we can trace it back to the first time the brain found fast relief, a quick fix, because whatever was stressful, overwhelming, boring, or uncomfortable at the time, it needed to stop as fast as possible. There was no, let's look at all the options and choose the best one. Nope. Years later, the context is completely different, but the brain doesn't see that. Impulsivity means there is not much time to change direction once you're triggered. It could be bad news that sends your emotions into overdrive. Anger, sadness, frustration, discouragement, or all of it at once. One of your kids has ADHD, comes home dysregulated, argues, refuses homework, and you're out of patience, solutions, and understanding. Or it could be a yearning for a more meaningful life and the emotional weight and existential questions that comes with it. The more able you are to identify the triggers, see the patterns, and regulate your emotions, the more likely you are to interrupt impulsive spending before it happens. For me, even when the weeks ahead or the months ahead are intense at work, and even if overwhelm tries to sneak in, it doesn't automatically lead to impulsive spending as a way to relieve discomfort. If you've ever wondered why this keeps repeating, that's why. Not because you're incapable, not because you're irresponsible. Here's a simple reframe you can experiment. When the urge to spend shows up, instead of asking, "How do I stop this?" try asking, "What am I trying to get out of right now?" Sometimes that question alone creates just enough space to interrupt the pattern. And if this feels hard to do on your own, that's not failure. It just means the pattern has been running for a long time. If this episode is in any way making you feel seen, understood, and a little bit curious, Unlock Your Financial DNA is actually the space where we explore how your money archetypes influence how you behave with money, where ADHD gets in the way, and we design money systems that feel meaningful, not draining. You can find out more about this coaching program designed for ADHD brains by clicking the link in the episode's description. Here's what I want you to take from this. We started with a belief I see all the time in my clients and one I used to hold myself. I'm reckless with money. I just need more self-control. Even if it feels true, and even if it's what you've been led to believe, it couldn't be further from the truth. What you did today was understand what happens before impulsive spending. You saw that it's not random, it's a patterned response to something the brain is trying to escape as fast as possible. And we shifted that belief to this. My brain uses spending as a fast regulation shortcut when I'm depleted. And that explains why this has felt so hard. So, knowing it's regulation, not recklessness, what does that change about how you see yourself? You know, you're not losing a battle against your brain. You're learning how it works. There's no flaws here, no personal failures, no missing pieces. You have a brain wired differently, and it's been trying to function in a world that was never designed for it. ADHD minds that are adequately supported navigate life with a lot more ease. So keep this in mind. You're not broken, you're not alone, and you don't have to do this the hard way. I truly hope this episode helped you see yourself and your relationship with money a little differently. If it did, let me know in the comments. I always love reading what resonates with you. If you know another ADHDer who might need to hear this, please share it with them. And make sure to follow or subscribe so we can keep rewriting the ADHD narrative together. Thank you for spending this time with me. I really appreciate you. Until next time, keep rocking that badass, phenomenal ADHD brilliance. Sending lots of love your way, and I'll catch you in the next episode.